In September of 1982, America was introduced to a quaint basement-level bar in Boston, a place where the beer was cold, the conversation was warm, and everybody knew your name. Cheers was modeled after a real Boston pub, the Bull and Finch, a cozy, below-street-level hideaway that made the perfect setting for a show about a bar. But while Cheers was set in a bar, it was never just about a bar. It was about the people who walked through its doors, their stories, their struggles, their search for connection. And no one embodied that search more than Shelley Long's character, Diane Chambers. When Diane first stepped into Cheers, she thought she was just passing through. She was engaged to Sumner Sloan, a literature professor she had once assisted as a graduate student. He was her intellectual equal, a man of refinement and sophistication. They had a future together, or so she thought. But before they could leave to be married in Barbados, Sumner needed to make a quick stop. His grandmother's diamond ring was still on the finger of his ex-wife. And although Diane was not keen on her fiancé visiting his ex-wife, Sumner insisted that symbols matter, and he would only be gone 10 minutes. So Diane waited at the bar while he went to retrieve it. And waited, and waited. More than an hour passed before Sumner finally returned without the ring. Barbara, his ex-wife, wasn't quite ready to part with it. Then, as if on cue, the phone rang. It was Barbara, now miraculously willing to surrender the ring. Sumner, ever the smooth talker, turned to Diane and suggested she book a later flight. With that, he left again, promising to return soon. Hours later, Diane still sat alone. Feeling uneasy, she called the airline to change her flight, only to discover the truth. Sumner had already taken the flight without her. And worse, he wasn't traveling alone. He had left with Barbara. In an instant, Diane's future unraveled. The life she had imagined for herself had vanished, and there she was, alone in a bar she would never have chosen for herself, stranded in a moment she never saw coming. She could have left that bar and never looked back. But something unexpected happened. She stayed. At first, it was out of necessity. She needed a job, and Cheers happened to be hiring. But over time, Cheers became more than a paycheck, more than a place to pass the time. It became her refuge, a place where people would come to know not just her name, but who she truly was. When Diane walked into the bar that day, she was seeking nothing more than a place to sit and wait for a few minutes. But if you'll allow me to speculate a little about this fictional character, I would posit that she was seeking much more than a stool to sit on. She was seeking a sense of certainty in a world that had just shifted beneath her, a place where she wasn't just passing through, but where she belonged, a soft landing after a fall she never saw coming. Diane didn't know it yet, but she was searching for sanctuary. She was not the only one who had arrived at Cheers needing more than just a drink. Others had come searching for refuge in their own way. Sam Malone, former Red Sox pitcher, had once been on top of the world, but after his baseball career ended and his battle with alcoholism nearly destroyed him, he needed a place where he could rebuild himself. Cheers became his second chance. Norm Peterson, the accountant with a sharp wit and self-deprecating humor, found himself in a job he didn't love and a marriage that often seemed indifferent. But at Cheers, he was greeted like royalty. His name cheered out the moment he walked through the door. Cliff Clavin, the know-it-all postal worker, struggled to fit in anywhere else. But at Cheers, his endless trivia and peculiar observations weren't just tolerated, they were expected. And of course, we cannot forget Carla Tortelli, the tough-talking waitress with a string of bad relationships and a house full of kids. She needed more than a paycheck. She needed a place where she didn't have to hold back. At Cheers, she could be as loud and sharp as she pleased, and instead of pushing her away, they pulled her in. Each of them came looking for something, whether they knew it or not, and each of them found more than a bar stool. They found sanctuary. And that's what made Cheers special. It wasn't just a bar. It was a sanctuary for the lost, the wandering, the searching. And in that way, maybe Cheers isn't all that different from church. People don't just find themselves on a bar stool by accident, and the same can be said for a church pew. Sure, some show up because it's expected of them. A spouse drags them along. A parent insists, or it's simply what they've always done. But if you look a little deeper, if you listen closely to the stories behind why people step through the doors of a church, you'll find something strikingly familiar. Many arrive feeling a little lost, a little untethered. Life didn't turn out quite the way they planned. A marriage has ended, a career is stalled, a dream has crumbled. They come looking for something solid when everything else feels shaky. Some show up carrying the weight of grief, longing for a space where they can sit with their sorrow without having to explain it. Some come because they are lonely. They have plenty of acquaintances. They have friendly coworkers, but not true friends. They have social media connections, people whose posts they scroll through with their morning coffee, but never someone to share a cup with. But what they don't have are enough people who truly see them. They're searching for the warmth of recognition, for a place where someone will notice if they're missing. Others come because the world outside feels too harsh, too cold. The news cycles are relentless, the division exhausting, the cruelty overwhelming. They need to know that kindness is still alive somewhere, that compassion still has a home. Some don't even know exactly why they're here. They just know they need something. A sense of peace, a moment of stillness, a reminder that they are not alone. At Cheers, it didn't matter where you came from, what mistakes you had made, or what baggage you carried through the door. If you walked in enough times, they got to know your name. And at its best, our religious community is the same way. A place where you don't have to have it all together to belong. A place where you can bring your whole self, the joy and the heartbreak, the wisdom and the wounds, and find not judgment, but welcome. But here's the thing about a place where everybody knows your name. Everybody has to be welcome. It's not truly sanctuary if it's only sanctuary for some. And that's where the challenge begins. Because being a place of refuge isn't just about opening the doors, it's about making room at the table for whoever walks through them. It's about being truly inclusive. As Unitarian Universalists, we talk a lot about being inclusive. It's one of our guiding values, something we take pride in. But the real question is, are we? We live in a world where inclusive has somehow become a bad word, where exclusive is a selling point, a mark of prestige. We see it in advertising, exclusive clubs, exclusive neighborhoods, exclusive restaurants. The message is clear. Exclusivity means value. If not everyone is welcome, it must be special. And recently, we've seen this warped way of thinking pushed into the cultural and political landscape. Exclusive has become positive, while inclusive has become negative. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, once considered a simple acknowledgement that all people deserve a fair shot, has been vilified by politicians and pundits who want us to believe that inclusivity is a threat. They claim it's divisive. They claim it's unnecessary. They say it's woke and dismiss it like it's some kind of weakness. But we know better. As Unitarian Universalists, we don't believe in drawing those kinds of lines. One of the things that distinguishes our faith from traditional Christianity and from many religious traditions is that we don't operate on exclusivity. We don't say you must believe as we believe to be part of this congregation. We don't say you must follow these rules or fit into this mold to belong. It's easy to look at those who are openly exclusive, those who argue against DEI, those who create barriers to belonging in the name of doctrine, those who make it clear that only certain kinds of people are truly welcome. It's easy to look at those people and congratulate ourselves for being different. It's tempting to rest in the comfort of knowing that we are on the right side of inclusivity. But being truly inclusive takes more than just avoiding exclusion. It takes more than distancing ourselves from those who draw harsh lines. Being inclusive is about more than just believing in inclusivity. It's about more than having the right principles printed in our hymnals. Because saying everyone is welcome is easy. Making sure people feel welcome, that takes effort. It takes tremendous courage to walk into a new church for the first time. You don't know the people or whether you'll fit in with them. You don't know the traditions, when to stand up, when to sit down, when to make an archway with your arms and sing while children march beneath. And for those whose only religious background has been in an evangelical or a more traditional church, stepping into a UU congregation for the first time can be disorienting. Here we might sing a classic hymn one week and a Bob Dylan ballad the next. The sermon might draw from the Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, or a fictional Boston bar. It's often not what people expect, and that can feel a little unsettling at first. They may find themselves scanning the room, wondering if they belong here, if anyone will notice them, if they made a mistake by walking through the doors. They might hesitate before taking a seat, unsure if there's some unspoken rule they don't yet understand. That moment takes courage, and what happens next determines whether they ever come back. If we are truly inclusive, then when an unfamiliar face walks through those doors, we don't just nod politely. We don't assume that because we're a welcoming congregation, they must feel welcomed. We introduce ourselves. We share our names. We learn their names. And if they happen to walk through those doors a second time, we don't greet them like a visitor. We greet them like Norm walking into Cheers. Because the difference between simply being open to everyone and being a place where people truly belong is not just in our beliefs, it's in our actions. It's important to make visitors feel welcomed, to ensure that when someone takes that first courageous step into our sanctuary, they are met with warmth, with hospitality, with a genuine sense of belonging. But inclusivity cannot begin and end at the doors. Because being inclusive isn't just about greeting the newcomer. It's about making sure those who have been here for years, those who have shown up Sunday after Sunday, those who have served on committees, taught religious education, and brewed the coffee, they also need to feel seen, valued, and appreciated. As important as it is to be a place of refuge for the Diane Chambers of the world, those searching for sanctuary, for a place to land after life has thrown them into chaos, we must also be a place of refuge for those already in the sanctuary. Because life doesn't stop happening just because you found a spiritual home. Finding a religious community doesn't mean we cease to have worries. It doesn't mean we are suddenly free from hardship. Members of this congregation, people sitting in these very pews, are carrying burdens we cannot see. They're facing health concerns, financial struggles, family conflicts, grief that lingers long after the casseroles have stopped arriving. And yet sometimes we assume that because someone has been here for years, they must be fine. They must already belong. They must already have everything they need from this community, but that's not always the case. A congregation is like a family, and like any family, it's easy to take one another for granted, to focus so much on the next new face that we forget to check in on the familiar ones. Mahatma Gandhi was a man who gave his life to the cause of justice. His leadership helped free a nation. His philosophy of nonviolence inspired movements across the globe. But while he was working to change the world, his own son, Harilal, struggled in the shadows of his father's greatness. Gandhi, who fought tirelessly for the dignity and liberation of millions, did not always extend that same care to his own child. Harilal longed for his father's guidance, his support, his blessing, but often found himself overlooked, cast aside in the wake of a mission larger than himself. He spent his life searching for something that should have been his all along, a place of belonging within his own family. We, too, are a justice-seeking people. We care about the world beyond these walls, and we should. We believe in the inherent worth and dignity of all people, and we fight for that worth and dignity to be recognized. But as we look outward, we must also look inward. Because if we're not careful, we can become so focused on making sure the doors are open to all that we forget to nurture those already inside. We can become so passionate about saving the world that we overlook the people sitting beside us, the ones who have shown up time and time again, quietly hoping someone will notice when they are struggling. Being truly inclusive means making sure no one, whether they have been here for 5 minutes or 50 years, feels like they are on the outside looking in. It means checking in on one another, not just when a crisis is obvious, but when there's no crisis at all. because inclusion is not just about responding to pain, but about fostering connection. It means recognizing that people don't stop needing to be seen just because they have been here for a while. Because a community is not built in a moment. It is built in the quiet, consistent acts of care, the conversations in the hallways, the unspoken understanding that you matter here. A place where everybody knows your name. And a place where no matter how long you've been here, that still means something. At the end of every episode of Cheers, the characters didn't always have their problems solved. Norm still had to go home to a marriage that wasn't always fulfilling. Carla still had a house full of kids to care for. Sam still carried the weight of his past. But for a little while, they had a place where they could set their burdens down. A place where they could laugh, be themselves, and know they belonged. And isn't that what we all long for? A place where we can bring our joys and our sorrows, our victories and our struggles, and know that we won't have to face them alone. A place where our presence matters, where our names are known, not just in passing, but in a way that says, I see you, I care about you, you belong here. That's the kind of place we strive to be. Because being truly inclusive is not just about the open door, it's about what happens after someone walks through it. It's about making sure that every person, whether they are stepping into this space for the first time or the 500th, feels like they have a place at the table. That's what it means to be a sanctuary. That's what it means to be a community. And that's what it means to be a place where everybody knows your name. May the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Coastal Georgia always be that place. Amen, and may it be so.